We're going to start talking the halacha. I'm going to stay on the short side. We'll do half halacha. Okay. Yeah. Machaber says, "Ein magilin the Chamei Teveriah." You're not allowed to do hagola in water from Chamei Teveriah, from a hot spring. I feel kelim shadin klisheni, even kelim that only are klisheni, so they just need to be kashered with hot water. Doesn't have to be from on the fire. When the Shein told us, or it's not heated by fire. And so we see the rule they told us, or just like the blia happened through something that heated through fire, they told us, or it has to be the plita has come out through something that came through fire. I guess we don't. I don't know what to tell you.
No.
Okay, we'll get to Shabbos in a second. The Rama says, if the only blia happens through Chamei Teveriah, then Magilu Behen, then you could do Hagol with them, cause Kibol Kachlote, and therefore you could catch with them. Because we'll stop over here. So, if you would have asked us this question before you saw this, then our logic would say is, as far as Blia and Plita, what's the difference whether it's Chamei Teveriah or regular heated water? What should be the difference? Hot water is hot water. Blia is going through hot water. They come out through hot water. This idea that the fact that it was heated by fire is different than not fire, that it should be different. That's not something that we would have thought. Okay, and the Gemara tells you what the makor is to say such a difference. Okay? And he says the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says in Shulchan, if you hamavashel the Chamei Teveriah on Shabbos is potter, and if you cook a korban Pesach in Chamei Teveriah, you're chayiv. I mean, the korban Pesach has to be cooked in fire without any water. So if you mavashel Chamei Teveriah on Shabbos, you're potter, and on korban Pesach you're chayiv. So if we would have read that Gemara, if we look at this Gemara, we would think that Gemara makes a lot of sense to us. For Shabbos, it depends on what they did in the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, they only cooked with things that had to do with fire. So Chamei Teveriah is not like in the Mishkan. So we could imagine why Mavashel Shabbos is potter. But for korban Pesach, the Torah says don't cook it in water. So if you cook korban Pesach in water from Chamei Teveriah, what's the difference? You cooked it in water. It has nothing to do with what they did in the Mishnah. You would think, when I read the Gemara, to me, what the Gemara said sounded very straightforward. Okay? For Shabbos, you're potter because it's not like the Mishkan. For Pesach, you're chayiv because you're not allowed to cook in water, and I cooked it in water. Okay? But in fact, the Gemara asked on this and says, no, it's not true. Because if you're potter for Shabbos, so then you should be potter for korban Pesach also. That even though the Brisa said you're chayiv for korban Pesach, the Gemara says by logic, the Gemara says in the Surah you should be potter. Why? And which is what our din is. The svara is that if you see that for Shabbos, cooking in not told us or in Chamei Teveriah is not the same as cooking in fire. So too for Pesach, cooking the korban Pesach. When the Torah says don't cook it in water, it means don't cook it in water that's heated by fire. The water that's heated by a different source is different. When by the Gemara's kasha, I'm asking, how come by korban Pesach should be potter for korban Pesach? The Gemara is showing us that cooking water heated by non-fire is so different. It's so different than regular water that when the Torah says "Vashel Mavushel b'mayim," now to cook your korban Pesach in water, it doesn't mean this kind of water. Okay, that is to say, even though the Brisa said you're chayiv, and the logic makes a lot of sense to me, the Gemara thought is so partially the other way, which is really our din. From there we see that cooking water heated with fire and water heated with some other source, like Chamei Teveriah, however that's heated up, they're completely different sources to the point that we could say now the Kashrus. Okay, and the Gemara over there, in Shulchan, does not. The Gemara's answer is you're talking potter for cooking it, and when it says you're chayiv for the korban Pesach for cooking it, the Chamei Teveriah, it doesn't mean you're chayiv for cooking it. It means you're chayiv because you're supposed to do tzli eish, so you're chayiv for not having done tzli eish. Okay, that's what you're chayiv for. You're not chayiv for cooking water. Cooking water you're potter for. You're chayiv for a side issue, which is cooking in tzli eish. So the Gemara is not logical that these waters are not the same, but that water, and that's where our din comes from. Okay, the Gemara says, I'm sucking memal from mouth. That's what he says. And that's what he means. This is a side point. It has nothing to do with it. It's an interesting side point, which is there's a whole bunch of achronim we'll talk about how in the world you can be mavashel korban Pesach with Chamei Teveriah, because to get it to Chamei Teveriah you have to take it out of Yerushalayim, okay, and make it come possible. So they say, no, then the Daik and Rashi, that Rashi says, the Chamei Teveriah, Rashi says it means is hot water from a spring. Rashi was trying to tell you that no, maybe Chamei Teveriah is just a way of saying a hot spring. Maybe there are hot springs in Yerushalayim. They say it's not true. The Gemara says there are no hot springs in Yerushalayim on purpose, so people shouldn't say they're being illegal. So there's a whole bunch of Achronim. You would think, I wouldn't have taken this Kashrus seriously. A whole bunch of the 100 years ago Achronim talk about, so how could you be mavashel with carbon pesach? Chamei Teveriah, there's no hot springs in Yerushalayim.
Obviously, that's what the Gemara means, so therefore you have to take it out, so therefore it's a Kashering, and a Kashering is not mavashel.
You mean the Gemara meant it because of the cliche? You brought the water from Tveria.
Because the part of Tveria,
and therefore that's why it's not visual, because it's a cliche.
The Gemara's whole
the clean to the Chamei Tveria for a while, making to Yerushalayim.
And then run through Yerushalayim. No, because the Gemara says.
You get from Tveria to
Yerushalayim. But that's not how the Gemara says. The Gemara says, if the fact that you put it on Shabbos shows us that it's not considered water, so therefore for Pesach it's supposed to be put. I'm saying the Gemara was so obvious. The Gemara, even if there's a kash on a price that says Yechayev, the price of Chayev seems very logical.
I mean, that's the Dambaki that the Gemara Shabbos talks about Chamei Tveria. That's the whole guy that they directly connected to the Aloha Eish. It's the din of Kerishin.
Okay.
That's by Chamei Tveria. The Rashi of Chamei Tveria
because it's connected.
It's a tziner, right?
Yeah.
You have a tziner there from Tveria to Yerushalayim.
All the way to Yerushalayim. Okay. Fine. Anyhow, it just had nothing to do with that. It's just the whole peckle of Achronim will talk about the Shaila. Okay? Which, of course, we understand that the Gemara is just saying a theoretical point, which is that if you mavash b'Chamei Tveria, right? Just like for an analogy, that you should just know that cooking in Chamei Tveria is not like cooking on fire. Okay. Now, really, for our purposes, carbon pesach is just an unusual thing. It's hard to imagine. The Torah says don't cook it in water. Tell us the truth. It looks like it's cooking in water. Our din is easier to understand because, like the Mechaber says, which comes from Rishonim, it's Kabbalah Kafotari. So if the method of cooking, this was heated up, I cooked up a pot of soup on a fire, and this is a different method of cooking, then we can understand that somehow in the rules of Kabbalah Kafotari it doesn't work. Okay, that the bli went in one way, you have to take the bli out the same way. But look, if you think about it, what do we say now about blias going in through Chamei Tveria? Okay, I take a trace, and I want to make a bli in through Chamei Tveria. So the Ramah said that it does. Ramah said there's bli through Chamei Tveria, and you have to do Kabbalah Kafotari. But now, the Gemara says that Chamei Tveria are not the same as cooking in regular fire. So how do we know the blias go in altogether with Chamei Tveria? Who told us that? Where did that come from? The Torah says you cook things in a normal way, then you have to kasher them. Who said blias go in altogether from Chamei Tveria? If they're so different, heating through this is not even like a klisheni. It's so different. It's not even like a klisheni. So who said blias go in the first place? Okay, now the Ramah says it does. But maybe somehow that's logical. Somehow in Svara, they understood blias went in. We've seen it 100 times that the Gemara, to them, blias were like real things. They saw it. Like, it was like for real. So maybe they saw it going in, and they could somehow, to them that was obvious that the blias went in. Okay, but I don't know why it's so obvious. I mean, so from our perspective, if Chamei Tveria is not even like a klisheni of hot water,
I don't know if
we passed. The Gemara says that it's pot. I don't know what that is. It says Chamei Tveria is pot. That's the Gemara's working for better. Okay, and now that what do you mean the supik maybe a blue went in? Okay. No, because then if we're misupik, then why would we be so surprised for the Brisa to tell us that if you mavash will come Chamei Tveria? Yeah. So what? Where's Ramah know the blias go into?
No, is the Brisa say that the blias go in?
No, but the Brisa says cooking the carbon pesach, and this thing is chayiv.
There's a moist misuk. The Brisa misuk. There's a moist misuk.
No, it says like the Brisa said you're chayiv for cooking like that. Right. If there's a suffix whether the blias go in or not, why would the Gemara be so surprised to hear that the Brisa says Yechayev? It's a kasha. How can it say the Brisa says Yechayev? It's not cooking. No, maybe the Brisa is teaching that it is considered like one.
No, then you should be chayev on Shabbos.
Then you should be chayev. No, so I would have said you're not chayev for Shabbos because you're not done with cooking the
What clause says if Chamei Tveria studies or from the Aruch Gehenim, then you're chayev on Shabbos.
Okay, fine.
Right.
But if it says when we say that it's potter. Assuming that it's
then you presume that Chamei Tveria is Tadus Chametz, not Tadus Aruch.
Correct. So then
you should be bothering on Pesach.
No, that's not true. Because Gabi Shabbos, it's not done until they cook the Mishkan. No. What does that have to do with Pesach?
Because Chamei Tveria is Tadus Aruch. You're right. You're not Chamei Tveria in the middle. But we know the Aruch is Tadus Aruch Chaim and Shabbos, B'dei Eisa,
Right.
And Chametz Teveriah says, well,
So if we think Potter means that it's not considered Togus or
that's right.
it's not Togus or. If it's not Togus or, so that makes sense why it's not Chayav on Shabbos. But why can't it still make? If it can make blias, I mean, if it works like not for Shabbos, for interaction with kalim, it works the same way like hot water, like blias go in. So then why can't you Chayav for cooking Korban Pesach? It's cooking. The food's getting cooked.
That's cooking. That's not cooking.
What's it to do with anything? What's it? If it's Shabbos,
if it's not something, that's not considered cooking. I mean, that's the whole shine about the lungs of the microwave and all.
It's not considered. It's not considered
That's
cooking.
okay, finished. The Torah says like Sabat, and it's visual. Torah is right there.
So it's not. So then
It's not cooking. So you need that. There's no issue of heating out the. It might be also there's no issue of heating out the Korban Pesach.
So that's not considered cooking. So how do you know that it makes blias? How do you know that?
No, I'm saying that. So the Muslim know that. The Muslim talk about that.
So Rama says that it makes
So the
blias.
Ramah is Masubah, the Mice is Machayis in the Gemara.
Oh, you mean since that whole din is in the suffix? Okay, fine. Okay. Now I have a more important question. What happens if you had a blia that went in through Chamei Teveriah? The Rama says you can have a blia that goes in through Chamei. Let's say the blia went in through Chamei Teveriah. Can you kasher it now with plain water?
From the age.
From a regular, right? Take a regular pot of water and kasher it with a regular pot of water.
Yes.
Why would you say that?
Marshal. It's Kashering.
No, it's not Kashering. It's not Kabbalah Kach Pote. Kabbalah Kach Pote says it's a different form. So if you somehow we decide it's a different way of cooking, so we say Kabbalah Kach Pote, if the blia went in this way, then you can't take it out that way. So you can only.
I understand, but that can't be worse.
I'm not saying that, right? They're different. If they're different, then it's different. I don't know if it's better or worse. It's just different.
You say it's different.
I believe you're
I don't think it's different. The way I'm saying it's not different.
What do you? How do you?
Stuff if it is done the sar, then kosher can water. If it's not the sar, then the marshal. We didn't go any
The
down.
Sar is better.
Right.
The Ramah is not saying it's better. The Ramah is just saying it's a fact.
That it's Baleh. Right. So now that it was Baleh, you think it's only a topic. It was Baleh. That what?
If it's not the sar, it wasn't Baleh, it wasn't pointed. If it's the sar, then it's Baleh and pointed.
Oh, you think that's what I went? Okay, fine. Okay, I would not have thought like that. I'll think about that. Okay, I wouldn't have thought like that.
Okay.
So I was surprised to see that the Mishbur says, without any makar to it, he says, and not only if the bli happens through Chamei Teveriah, the Ramah says you can kasher with Chamei Teveriah. The Mishbur says, and you can also kasher it with water. Okay, I'm not sure where that comes from. He's saying it on his own. He doesn't bring. I don't see anybody else who said that before him. Where did that come from? If the problem is Kabbalah Kaspote, then these are just different. It's like two different forms. Who said that if you could do, just like you can't kasher Chamei Teveriah to get out from water, so maybe you can't get water to get out from Chamei Teveriah. So maybe you'll tell me. So look, the Torah says you kasher everything with water. You'll still kasher with water, and that's like I said, it works for all kinds of cases. Yeah? But I love we're reading a lot into the din, into that pasuk to say it means even the thing that's not like it, that the hagol the other way doesn't work.
Aish is a stronger belief than Chamei Teveriah.
Right, but what's the makar to that?
Get it.
Right, where does that come from? How do you know that? The Mechaber just said that it's not Kabbalah Kafpote. Who said it's like, for example, for Korban Pesach, it's true. Water cooked is considered cooking, and Chamei Teveriah is not considered cooking. It's like a lower level. For Shabbos, water is considered cooking, and Chamei Teveriah is not. So maybe you could imagine from that the water seems to be stronger than that. But that's not really how the Mechaber said. The Mechaber said Kabbalah Kafpote. Okay, so it's not Okay, so I'm not really sure. I mean, the Gra is, when I said the Gra, I didn't mean to say that he's arguing on the Mechaber. The Gra is just giving the background. I mean, just like the Gra is just explaining, maybe I wasn't clear about it. The Gra is just explaining, you don't think, if I cook up the water, if the bli happened in a blue pot, doesn't mean I have to kasher in the blue pot, because blue pots don't mean anything, right? The point here is that we have to show that there's a difference between a blue pot and a green pot before I say a Kabbalah Kafpote. That's what he trying to say. Okay, anyhow. Okay, so this din of Chamei Teveriah is to us, at least on the surface, a very remote case. It has nothing to do with, whoever dreams of such a case, okay, that someone should kasher Chamei Teveriah. It's something that has to do with us, that I am purposely misrepresenting what the Achronim are saying, because really what the Achronim has to do, the next part of them we'll do next time. But there's a case that we have that's very similar to this, okay, which is kashering with steam. Okay, when we have people want to do is they want to heat up something with steam. Okay, we'll see why in a second, why it works easy for companies. Instead of filling up a pot with water, they want to fill up the pot with steam. Okay, and they want to use the steam to kasher. So the the svaras that Rav Moshe says, Rav Moshe does not use the word Chamei Teveriah, but the svaras Rav Moshe says for why you can't do it are along the lines, we'll see more about this next time, along the lines of the Chamei Teveriah, which is, just because the blias can go in through steam, and he says blias will go in through steam, he says blias may not come out, the blia that comes out through steam may not be the same way that blia comes out with water. Okay? He says, if the blia went in through steam, you can get it out with steam also. If the blia happened like that, you could do kabbalah kapote. But if the blia went in through water, he says that I'm not sure that you could take the blia out. It's a sort of, he's not committed to it, but he's like, it's along the lines of, that maybe it's different. It's like not heated up through fire, maybe that somehow it's different. Now, of course, the steam is heated up by fire. It's not really Chamei Teveriah. The steam, way back where, there's a fire someplace burning that's heating it up. It's not like Chamei Teveriah, which have no fire to them at all. There's some magically heated up. These have a fire to them, go back a few steps, you'll see the fire. But the point is that they're not the same as water. Maybe steam doesn't work the same way as water. So just like Kabbalah Kapote from Chamei Teveriah is, just like Kabbalah Kapote from Chamei Teveriah says, if the blia went in through water, it can't come out through Chamei Teveriah because they're different forms. So too, the blia that went in with water can't come out with steam. So, okay. So now we had a shayla like this. Before we get to the more typical cases like this, what happens if you had a case? We had a chute that was used to drop cheese into a big kettle. Okay. The kettle was the pot that cooked it up. That was going to be kasher with regular boiling water. It was not going to be a problem. They would fill it up instead of filling it. Usually it's filled with water and cheese. They were instead just going to fill it with plain water. That was not the problem. The problem was that the chute that sat above it, the chute that was above it had the cheese, cold cheese pouring down into it, and that chute had steam rising up from this kettle and making it hot. Okay, so there were potential for trace blias in that chute, but there were two kinds of blias going on in the chute. There's one is the steam just pouring out from the hot cheese. Okay, that was one thing, and that was easy. We could kasher that kabbalah kapote, just like the blia happened through steam. We'll kasher it back. We'll kasher it with steam.
Where's the steam coming from the cheese?
There's a pot of cooking up cheese, and the way the cheese gets into it, it drops from on top through a chute into that thing. So the chute itself, which has cheese all over it, has steam rising out of it, and right above it is this chute that's getting hit with trace steam. That's fine, so we can kasher that kabbalah kapote. Okay, but the shayla was like this. What about the fact that the cheese that's on that chute, the cheese that sits there, not that's flying through, the cheese that's like stuck on, gets hot, the steam heats up the cheese, and now the cheese is, forget about that there's steam here, there's just a hot piece of cheese sitting on the chute. So should we say that blia is not happening through steam, the blia is happening from a hot piece of cheese? It's a hot stuff, of course. It's a hot piece of cheese that's sitting on there.
But I don't know if it's not a Rishon.
I'm sorry. The child is from a cliché. If it would be Chamei Teveriah, you couldn't use it even from a cliché. The Machabit says you can't even kasher from a cliché. But when it's Chamei Teveriah, it's completely like a whole different form. It doesn't work for anything. You can't kasher if the blia happened in a cliché, and of regular water. You can't kasher with Chamei Teveriah. So it doesn't work for anything. It's completely.
I don't know if it's behind Mikra and it's Kashering because it's the cheese that you're talking about.
Why?
When the cheese was never cooked in a Rishon.
So the cheese is a cliché.
Okay, it's a Mikra is never that.
Well, we kasher. Machabit himself said that we kasher from a cliché. We don't read things from a cliché. We kasher from a cliché. It was way back when, at the beginning of Taftan Aleph, and it's a regular deal. We kasher from a cliché. I'm not talking about we'll trace it up at the end, no, but of course we kasher. So the hot cheese now that's sitting on there, so should we say, forget about that the hot cheese became heated.
The heat it can be worse, the source of the heat, right? It can be more mass than the source of the heat.
So that's correct. That's what we decided. And the raya was very simple, was right from this din. Okay? And the raya is because, the raya that it's true that you kasher that part with steam also is because we're learning the din here that something became traced from Chamei Teveriah. Okay? Well, Chamei Teveriah are not humstick. How did it become? The Rambam says it became traced through Chamei Teveriah or humstick through Chamei Teveriah. You can kasher with Chamei Teveriah. Well, that didn't. Chamei Teveriah are not humstick. It means you heated up a pot in the Chamei Teveriah. Okay, in other words, you put a pot in. You cooked up your farina in the Chamei Teveriah. That's how you heated it up. No, the Chamei Teveriah itself is not. It doesn't have to be the steam. The non-water thing is itself chametz. It means it's the thing that you used to heat it up. The heat source was, in our case, not from fire, so therefore you have to kasher, then you can kasher kabbalah kapote. So in our case, the heat source for heating up this cheese was steam, So if that's how it became hot, we can kasher through that also. It's not more powerful, like you said. It's not more powerful than what it came from. It came from steam, so we can kasher it with steam also. Okay, the reason why we're running through all these hoops here is because this chute has no way to put water into it. It's just a chute hanging up there. We can't put it into water. That's why we were trying to use the steam to kasher. Okay. Okay, now, but the real shaila about kashering the steam is not for such fancy cases like this chute. Okay, but it is. There's a number of Aruch will talk about it. Moshe talks about it. It's first in the Marsham, and there's a back and there's a remiss to it in the Prima Gadol also about this. And the shaila comes the most common cases that people want to do is when you have a huge tank, okay, it holds thousands and thousands of gallons. So either it has no heat source. I mean, like let's say you pour hot liquids into there, but there's no way to heat it up from itself. There's no jacket or something to heat it up. Or you could heat it up, but it'll take you a month to heat it up. So you put the water in and then sit and try to heat the water up. It'll take forever to heat it up. It's just a big hassle to do it. So what companies want to do is they have steam in the plant. There's lots of steam floating around. So they say, we'll just shoot steam into this thing. It's easy to do that. And we'll quickly get the whole thing up 200 degrees, around like 212, whatever temperature you want to. It's easy to do that just by shooting steam into it. Okay, the steam will heat it up very quickly. So Moshe says, you can't use the steam to do hagala. The bleed happens through a regular liquid, but you can't kasher with steam. But Moshe says two exceptions, okay, which are, one of them is very practical. Okay, one of the exceptions is, three things. One, of course, if the bleed happens through steam, you can kasher through steam. Okay. One exception is that if you have liquid that's on there and the steam just heats up the liquid, that's fine also. Okay. So in other words, that's more of a case as if you would put water into the tank. So you put water into the tank and then you put steam into the water to heat the water up, or that would be fine because then it's hot water that's doing the kasher. But the case that's most lamaisa, that comes up much more often is when they have these huge tanks. What they'll do is like this: they pump steam into the tank, and at first the tank walls are 80 degrees like it is outside, and the steam that's coming into them, what happens is when the steam hits the cold walls, the relatively cold walls, the steam condenses on the walls. At first the steam condenses and it comes down, a little trickle of condensation will come down to the floor. If you let it run for long enough with enough steam, with a closed tank, what will happen is with time, the water that's coming out of the bottom will be like a flood of water coming out of the bottom, because there'll be so much condensation on the walls, and to the point that condensation will slowly rise up in temperature till it's at Roishon, till it's 212 degrees, and will happen to the point that you could look in and see it, or you could just be mishayir that the walls are completely coated with water. And what's happening is the steam is condensing on the wall. Imagine a room this size, the steam would be condensing all over the walls, and then pouring down, just rolling down the walls. So what they're doing is the steam is a trick for getting water onto the walls. The steam is not the kashering. The steam is turning into droplets of water on the sides, and if you do it for long enough, you see so much water coming out of the bottom that you know the whole thing is coated with water. So, because really, for Hagala, the point of the Hagala is to have hot water contacting the surface. The normal way to do that is to fill the whole thing up. This is a way to get hot water to touch the surfaces, hot water to touch all the surfaces without filling the thing up. That's either you're spreading hot water all around without anything touching the middle, and it works. Okay, I've done it, and people do it for these huge tanks where it's just not realistic to fill them up and boil the water up. Excuse me, it's done. The only important thing to remember is this: you have to think of beforehand. Is that if it's not a particularly strong tank, what will happen is when you're finished, if you turn the steam off, the obvious thing to do is when you're finished, say, okay, that's fine, it's all kasher. So the obvious thing they do is they turn off the steam, and what do? Open up the top to let the thing cool off, to let all the heat out. And what happens is, as soon as you open that top and cold air comes in, all the steam all turns into water. It cools off quickly, creates a vacuum on the inside because the steam takes up a lot of space. And when it cools off into water, it takes up a little space. And if the tank walls are not strong, the whole thing will implode. Okay, the whole tank will just smash in on itself. There'll be no air on the inside, and the whole thing will smash together. Okay, so I have not seen it, but I have heard about it. When they screamed, it wasn't loud enough that I could hear it without the phone, but I have heard about it. So you have to either it's for a strong tank, like a tank that's meant to be heated can usually handle it, or it has to be cooled down slowly. Okay, but the typical thing the person would do, which is turn off the steam, then flip open the top, and just start cooling it off, we want to put food into there, there'll be no tank left. Okay, so you have to, the people who do this have to think about this before. And how are we going to cool the thing down? Getting it hotter is easier than
do the company before.
That's it. Before they do that, yeah. Well, I'm saying getting it hot is easier than getting it cold. Okay, and I've seen it done, and it works. I'm saying for these huge tanks, that's what works. That's the. Okay.